just past 7:30 p.m. across India, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll get you top stories from India and the region. I am Tanvi Taneja. And for news from the rest of the world, I'm joined by my colleague in Washington, D.C., Caroline Malone. Caroline, how's the weather like in D.C.?
Well, good morning, Tanvi. It's 10 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. and 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we go live to Tel Aviv, Israel, to find out the latest on getting humanitarian aid to people in Gaza. But first, the headlines.
Kremlin affirms the only potential area for dialogue between the United States and Russia is strategic security, including space deployment of nuclear weapons. Russian forces reportedly enter Ukraine's eastern city of Chasiv Yar, a claim which Ukraine denies. Melting snow sparks flooding in a number of regions in Russia. Israel dismisses 2 senior officers with stern warnings after finding grave errors in strike on aid workers. Agrees to open new routes to increase the flow of aid into Gaza. And India beats the heat on campaign trail for parliamentary polls. Prime Minister and senior BJP leader Narendra Modi addresses rally in northern state of Rajasthan. Opposition party Congress releases its Nyay Patra poll manifesto. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov on Friday affirmed that the main potential area for dialogue between the United States and Russia now is on issues related to strategic security, including space-based weapon systems. The U.S. administration has confirmed their plans to put forth a resolution to the UN Security Council next week to ban the deployment of nuclear weapons in space. This comes months after the White House confirmed that it had evidence that Russia was developing a space-based nuclear anti-satellite weapon, something that Moscow has flatly denied.
The main potential area for dialogue between the United States and Russia is precisely issues related to strategic security, including those in space. As for the draft, first we need to wait, familiarize ourselves with it.
Russian forces on Friday claimed to have taken control of the settlement of Vodyen in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. Meanwhile, situation in Ukraine's eastern city of Chasiv Yar remains tense. Russian forces claim to have entered the city of Chasiv Yar on Friday. The Ukrainian military says, however, that it is in a very difficult situation on the battlefield and has denied reports that Russian troops had reached its suburbs. Chasiv Yar, located about 10 kilometers west of Bakhmut, has served as an important staging point for Ukrainian troops and is now heavily fortified. DD India's Megumi Lim sent us this report from Kiev.
Well, according to the Russian news agency RIA, which cited an advisor to a Russian-appointed regional head, Moscow's forces had entered the suburb of Chasiv Yar in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. But a spokesman for Ukraine's Eastern Command said although the situation there was very difficult and that the fighting was continuing, he said Russian forces had not entered. Moscow's troops have been trying to seize the entire Donetsk and Luhansk regions, parts of which are currently occupied by Russia. And Ukrainian military officials have said that Chasiv Yar, if captured, would likely become a staging ground for a Russian advance towards Kostyantynivka, Kramatorsk, and Slovyansk. Ukrainian troops are continuing to face critical shortages of weapons and ammunition while a $60 billion military aid package is being held up in the U.S. Congress. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that without this additional military aid, his troops will have to retreat step by step. Meanwhile, an intelligence source cited in a Reuters report said Ukraine attacked Russia's Morozovsk military airbase in the Rostov region overnight, destroying 6 Russian warplanes. The joint operation was reportedly carried out by the SBU security service and military. Russia's defense ministry said its air defense system had downed 53 Ukrainian drones overnight, most of them over the Rostov region. Ukraine has stepped up its drone attacks against targets deep inside Russia in recent weeks, especially against oil refineries in an aim to cripple Russia's oil revenue. Megumi Lim in Kiev reporting for DD India.
In a video released by Russia's Emergency Situations Ministry, civilians were being evacuated in Russia by rescue teams in boats from flooded areas in a number of regions across the country. Melting snow has caused flooding in several Russian regions. 36 locations across Russia's Siberia and Ural regions with high water levels blocking 190 low-lying bridges and 120 roads with over 2,000 residential houses to have been flooded. DD India's Dasha Chernyshova sent us this report from Moscow.
Emergency has been announced in several regions of Russia that are now experiencing spring floods. In southern Orenburg region, at least 1,600 people, including children, have been evacuated as flooding has affected over 1,000 homes, around 400 private properties across 23 municipalities. Governor Denis Pasla emphasized the urgency of mobilizing all available resources for emergency rescue operations and preemptive evacuations of residents from the high-risk areas. He said flooding will last for at least 2 or 3 weeks. Evacuation of residents from the flood zone is taking place in the village of Kadui in the Vologda region. Acting governor of the region said the flood situation is tense, adding that there has been no such inflow of water since 1966. The emergency ministry says at least 5 bridges and 13 roads, along with some 700 homes, are in the flooding areas in the Moscow region, but note that evacuation of people is not needed. The most difficult situation has been reported in the Altai region, but water has started to recede there. Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow, reporting for DD India.
On to West Asia now. As the Israel-Hamas conflict nears its 6-month mark, United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres on Friday reiterated for immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the conflict, unconditional release of hostages while protecting civilians and allowing for free aid delivery to Gaza.
Nothing can justify the horror unleashed by Hamas in October 7th. And I call for the unconditional release of all the hostages still held by Hamas and other armed groups. Until then, they must be treated humanely with visits and assistance from the International Committee of the Red Cross.
Israel has concluded its investigation into the killing of 7 aid workers in an airstrike in Gaza this week. My colleague Caroline Malone is in Washington, D.C. She takes it forward from me here, gives us more on other stories also making headlines around the world. Caroline, Israel now accepting the grave errors in this unintended airstrike on aid workers?
Well, that's right, Tanvi. Israel has dismissed 2 of its officers and formally reprimanded senior commanders after finding what it is called a grave mistake in the strike on aid workers. Well, the move comes after Israel made public the findings of an inquiry into the killing of 7 aid workers in an airstrike in Gaza this week and found serious errors and breaches of procedure by the military. At the same time, the Israeli government has approved a series of steps to increase the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet has agreed to reopen the Erez crossing into northern Gaza and allow temporary use of Ashdod port in southern Israel. In addition, the cabinet also agreed to increase Jordanian aid through the Kerem Shalom crossing point located in southern Gaza. The United States has welcomed Israel's decision, but said success would be seen by improving the situation on the ground.
What we're looking to see in the days and weeks ahead is prioritization, surging humanitarian assistance, sustaining it, getting it to the people who need it, making sure that those who are providing it are safe and secure, and maximizing every effort to protect civilians, those who are caught in this crossfire Hamas is making. We just can't have so many people caught in that crossfire, killed, injured, going forward.
Meanwhile, GPS signals have been blocked across large parts of Israel to disrupt missiles and drones. That's amid increasing tension with Iran, after Israel's recent airstrike on Iran's embassy compound in Damascus. Well, Israel's defense forces have announced it was halting all leave for soldiers serving in combat units. And this is a day after reservists were also called up to bolster air defense units. There's another attempt to expedite the process of releasing hostages being held by Hamas. The US CIA Director Bill Burns is expected to travel to Cairo this weekend and to meet his Egyptian and Israeli counterparts, as well as the Qatari Prime Minister, and try to reach a breakthrough in talks on releasing hostages being held by Hamas. Well, US President Joe Biden is visiting Baltimore on Friday to review the situation of the collapsed bridge and to meet the families of the people who died in the accident. Biden will take an aerial tour of the area where a cargo ship crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge on March 26th, killing 6 people. Reconstruction of the bridge will cost at least $2 billion, and there are challenges over allocation of funds for it. Baltimore is one of the busiest ports in the US, so authorities have opened 2 temporary channels to try and allow some vessels to get through.
6 individuals tragically lost their lives when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed last week. They were hard workers laboring in the middle of the night to repair potholes on a bridge that tens of thousands of travelers crossed every day. The president will meet with loved ones of those individuals during his trip.
Well, DD India's Nick Harper joins us live now for more. So, Nick, what exactly are we expecting from a visit to Baltimore by President Biden today?
Carolina, this will be a busy day, an important day for the president, really trying to do multiple different things. We're told that he will be there to survey the damage of the bridge, including getting an aerial tour of that crash site. He'll then be meeting with first responders and some of those who were involved in that initial response when the bridge came crashing down early last Tuesday morning. But he'll also be there in a capacity of comforter-in-chief. He'll be meeting with the families of the 6 people who died, speaking to them about what took place, trying to give them some counsel after last week's tragedy. And he'll be making a public speech in which he'll be talking about the future of rebuilding that bridge. As you mentioned, a $2 billion price tag is on the reconstruction of that bridge, and there is now a fight underway as to who pays for it and how it gets paid. The Democratic governor of Maryland is pushing Congress to approve federal funds to pay for this bridge. He's arguing that it's not up to the state of Maryland to have to pay for this because this port is hugely important to the economic wealth of the United States as a result of all the cargo traffic that comes in and out of it. However, we have seen a number of funding fights in Congress, a very divided partisan atmosphere there at the moment. And there is that possibility that Republicans, especially in the House where they hold a slim majority, might push back against the idea of the federal government having to foot this $2 billion price tag.
And Nick, what updates do we have on the 20 Indian crew members? We understand they're still stranded on board the ship.
That's right, yeah. A week and a half since the accident in Baltimore, those crew members remain on the ship. They have not been able to leave, and there is a real question mark as to when they might be able to leave, not just the port, but potentially to come off the ship itself, to have some time on shore. We know that there are a number of aid organisations, non-profits, that have been in communication with the sailors and crew on board that ship. They've been helping to supply them with a whole variety of different items, including SIM cards and hotspots, so that they can carry on communications while on board the ship. Now, they're not in any danger, but there is that long-term implication to them, because we're told that all of the debris around that crash site will need to be removed before there's any chance that the crew will not just be able to move the ship, but be allowed off it. So a real question mark as to how long all of this could take, potentially stretching into weeks. All of that during a time when those 20 crew members remain stranded on board that ship in the port in Baltimore.
Well, thank you, Nick. That was Nick Harper reporting from Washington. Well, leaders from the European Union have agreed to provide support to Armenians in a meeting with Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan on Friday. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken have announced support for ethnic Armenians from the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Washington backed the country's efforts to provide more support to Armenia.
We're committed to further growing our support for Armenia's democratic and economic resilience, with investments for food security, digital infrastructure, diversification of energy, diversification of trade partners, and other priorities that the Prime Minister has set. And we will continue to support the 100,000 ethnic Armenians displaced from Nagorno-Karabakh. This is central to Armenia's long-term stability and prosperity, as well as its regional security.
Well, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has defended his government's bill to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. In an interview, Sunak defended his approach and indicated that the United Kingdom would be willing to leave the European Convention on Human Rights if it blocked his Rwanda policy.
I'm determined to stop the boats, and that's why the Rwanda scheme is so important. If you come to our country illegally, you won't be able to stay, and we will be able to return you. Either to your home if it's safe, but if not, to a safe alternative, and that's where Rwanda comes in. Now, that's why I'm doing everything I can to get this bill through Parliament so that we can start sending people to Rwanda. And once we can get that done, you will see that people stop coming, because it won't be worth their while paying anyone.
Well, that's it from me here in Washington, DC. Back to you, Tanvi, in the studio.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Caroline Malone joining us all from Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global, still to come on the show. Pakistani judges received threatening letters filled with suspicious substance suspected to be anthrax. And famous fashion brand Armani put under judicial administration by an Italian court. We'll tell you why.
How did the People's Republic of China capture Tibet back in the day? And is it time to consider a social media ban for kids? Watch Connecting the Dots to get the full picture every Friday at 8 p.m. IST on DD India.
Thank you for staying with us on DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. The Reserve Bank of India, RBI, on expected lines left policy rates unchanged for the 7th consecutive time in their latest monetary policy review on Friday. RBI Governor highlighted that strong economic growth has given room to the central bank to continue its focus on containing inflation to the 4% target on a durable basis.
The RBI's Monetary Policy Committee maintained status quo on rates, as was widely expected, while being cautious given the various uncertainties. Highlighting that inflation remains challenging, RBI's MPC decided to keep rates unchanged and maintained a withdrawal of accommodation stance.
The Reserve Bank MPC decided by a majority of 5-1 to keep the policy repo rate unchanged at 6.5%.
GDP forecast for FY25 is retained at 7%, and inflation projection for FY25 was also unchanged at 4.5% from the February 2024 policy.
CPI inflation for the current year 24-25 is projected at 4.5%, with Q1 at 4.9%, Q2 at 3.8%, Q3 at 4.6%, and Q4 at 4.5%. The risks are evenly balanced. Inflation has come down significantly but remains above the 4% target.
Core inflation, including services inflation, has been moderating in the last few months. However, the main concern of the central bank is the persistent high food inflation and the adverse impact of that on household inflationary expectations. Experts believe that RBI is likely to change MPC stance and cut rates in the second half of FY25. Until then, there will be a cautious pause by the MPC.
The economic situation is panning out as the MPC expected it to, even in February policy. We could see the window for rate cuts to open up only in second half of FY25. Until then, we see that there will be a cautious pause by the MPC with respect to its policy rates.
Enabling UPI for cash deposit facility, UPI access for prepaid payment instruments through third-party apps, and distribution of central bank digital currency through non-bank payment system operators are some of the additional measures announced by the central bank.
The GDP is robust and the inflation is moderating. However, the task is not over yet. The Reserve Bank of India will remain focused on aligning the target of inflation on durable basis. Shama Mishra, DD India, Mumbai.
Former Principal Economic Advisor to the Government of India, Sanjeev Sanyal, gave a thumbs up to the RBI's latest monetary policy review. He said growth of the Indian economy is being achieved while maintaining macroeconomic stability.
The economic assessment of the Monetary Policy Committee, as announced by Governor Shaktikant Das, is spot on in my view. The economy is in good nick. We got very strong growth in the last financial year, about 8% plus, and their assessment is that it will grow at about 7%, which I think is a very good rate. It will still make us the world fastest growing economy into this financial year as well. But what is important is that this is being achieved while maintaining macroeconomic stability. And I cannot emphasize this more, because it is possible to get occasional spurts of growth, but in order to sustain it, you need to have macro stability. And so here we see that inflation is expected to be around about 4.5%, well within the 2 to 6% range.
And we now get you up to speed with India's poll pulse. With the Indian elections just a fortnight away now, different political parties have intensified their campaign pitch. Prime Minister and senior BJP leader Narendra Modi is in India's largest geographical state, Rajasthan, where he held a rally in the city Churu. Addressing the voters, Prime Minister Modi asserted that promises made by the ruling party have always been fulfilled, unlike other parties. The main contest is between the BJP and the Congress party here. The state of Rajasthan has 25 seats in the lower house of parliament.
भाजपा जो कहती है वो जरूर करती है। दूसरी पार्टियों की तरह भाजपा केवल घोषणा पत्र नहीं जारी करती, हम तो संकल्प पत्र लेकर के आते हैं। 2019 में हमने जो संकल्प पत्र जारी किया था, उसके ज्यादातर संकल्प पूरे हो चुके हैं। और 2 साल कोविड के संकट के बावजूद भी मोदी ने आपको जो वादा किया था, वो वादा पूरा करने के लिए एड़ी चोटी का जोर लगा दिया है।
On the other hand, India's opposition party, the Congress, on Friday released its manifesto for the upcoming general elections in New Delhi today, highlighting the 5 pillars of justice in their manifesto titled Nyay Patra. The party promises 25 guarantees to the voters of the country. The 3 themes of the manifesto include work, wealth and welfare. The document also stated jobs and education to the people. The release event was attended by Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge along with leaders Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi and P. Chidambaram among others.
हमारा ये घोषणा पत्र देश के राजनीतिक इतिहास में न्याय के दस्तावेज के रूप में याद किया जाएगा। राहुल जी के नेतृत्व में चली भारत जोड़ो न्याय यात्रा में 5 पिलर्स पर ध्यान केंद्रित किया गया था। यात्रा के दौरान युवा न्याय, किसान न्याय, नारी न्याय, श्रमिक न्याय और हिस्सेदारी न्याय की घोषणा की गई थी। जहां कहीं भी हम गए इन न्याय की बात हमने करी थी और इसकी गारंटी भी हमने दी है।
And now we take a look at what else is happening across the world. In Pakistan, several judges have received threatening letters laced with a white powder suspected to be anthrax. The Pakistani Counter-Terrorism Department has said it received the forensic report of the powder found in these mysterious letters sent to the judges of the High Courts and the Supreme Court. Italian fashion group Armani has been placed under judicial administration by an Italian court for indirectly subcontracting its production to Chinese companies that exploited workers. The court in Milan ordered a 1-year receivership for Giorgio Armani operations, described as an industrial company of the Armani Group. Musical Mamma Mia is set to celebrate 25 years in London's West End this weekend. At the same time, ABBA, the Swedish pop group whose music inspired the show, celebrates 50 years since the release of Waterloo. The show, which opened in London in 1999, had 3 women at the helm: writer Katherine Johnson, director Phyllida Lloyd and producer Judy Kramer. That's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter and Instagram. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.